from. Tell your girl she can kick it if she wants some, but we got no time to waste.
Happy Black History Month and welcome to 4AZ. I'm your host Tyler McDowell Blanken and we are back with another Abbott Elementary 2-pack recap. I should trademark that, huh? Arizona third grade teacher Sarah Beth joins me again to discuss the two most recent episodes, Strike and Girard Creek. In case you missed it, I interviewed actress Zinnia Zolamiso to discuss her role as Lila, Janine's student from episode 11. A big thank you to Zinnia and everyone who watched or listened to that conversation. Check out the episode once you're done here. Before getting into Abbott, Sarah Beth and I discussed some local and national education news. There's a lot to get into, from Phoenix's Isaac Elementary School District's budget crisis to President Trump's proposed indoctrination legislation. I feel particularly grateful to the educators in my life and everyone working in education who bring joy and purpose to the work day in and day out, especially when times feel uncertain or heavy. I would also feel grateful if you follow us at 4AZ Teach. Please be sure to like this video, leave us that coveted 5-star review, or even share it with someone in your life. I hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you. You may know her as Dear Sarah Beth, at Dear Sarah Beth, as a matter of fact. You may know her as the Certified Yapper. I did not bestow that nickname on her. Apparently others have. She'll get into that in just a moment. We are back with Sarah Beth to discuss the two latest episodes of Abbott Elementary. Sarah Beth, how you been? What's up, homie?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. That Certified Yapper story, this is true, right? I didn't make that up.
It is true. It's been a long-standing joke. I don't know if you've ever seen the meme where it's like the guy and he's like working and he's got the piece of paper taped to his shirt and it's like, do not talk to him. He will get off task.
No.
Or something like that. I'll have to find it and send it to you. So that's always been the running joke at work is that like, I'm going to yap and like, it doesn't hurt my feelings. If you look at me, you're like, I have to do work. I need you to go away. And last year when we hired a bunch of people, I remember telling my secretary, I was like, hey, I need a shirt that says Certified Yapper because like, they just need to know who I am. Like, I'm going to talk to you if you talk back and we're going to chat. It's been this way my entire life. And it's also okay to be like, hey, Sarah, I have to get work done. I need you to go because never hurts my feelings. And so this year for Christmas, my best friend got me a shirt that says Certified Yapper. She was telling me, she's like, I told my mom. My mom's like, isn't that mean? And I'm like, no, it's great. It was the best gift. And it's funny because she didn't even know I told the secretary about getting a shirt. We just know I'm the Certified Yapper. Anyone who's met me knows I'll talk.
You were meant to be a teacher. Speaking of which, Sarah Beth, before we get into Abbott Elementary, I am very excited for your thoughts on these two episodes. Let's talk about education nationally and locally. On Wednesday, President Trump signed 2 executive orders on school funding that fulfill promises he made on the campaign trail, including on school choice and ending funding for schools that support what the White House deems, quote, radical indoctrination. On the local level here in Arizona, specifically in the greater metropolitan Phoenix area, our friends over at Isaac Elementary School District are nearly $30 million in debt. Arizona Education Association President Marisol Garcia said, quote, Isaac members are going to work on Wednesday without pay because kids can't afford to not have qualified educators in the classroom. Sarah Beth, we last recorded an Abbott 2-pack recap on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It's also the same day as the inauguration. I can't believe that was less than 2 weeks ago. So much has happened just in our education world, nationally, locally. What are your thoughts?
Got a lot of them. It has been a tough 10 days. I teach out in a Title I rural school. School vouchers have already, especially in Arizona, we've had ESA vouchers for a while, even though Arizonan voters had voted against the expansion of ESA. Governor Ducey a few years ago overruled that and expanded them completely. And we're seeing the effects. Just What a lot of people don't know is that when public funds are distributed to schools, charters get the first round of funds, but they're not held to the same standard. And then now with the school vouchers being expanded to allow to use like private school, homeschooling. I know our Chris Mays, our AG, there's been multiple, they've found that like people are abusing them. People have used these vouchers to like do karate classes, build Lego kits. One charter school, I think, used the vouchers. It was like to buy deep freezers or something. Yeah, like, and so, but then we have these school districts like Isaac, which services like a very small community, and teachers showing up, knowing they may not have healthcare, knowing they may not have funds, and to see this like be expanded just nationwide and how much it's going to hurt our public schools. Like, really, my big belief is that school choice only benefits a select few. Charter schools, privates don't have to take you. They don't have to service your IEP. They don't have to provide 504 accommodations. And so it's our kids that end up getting hurt. And it's really like legalized segregation at this point. We're benefiting this very small few kids, right? Because the vouchers never cover the price of private. It's like, it gives you a nice little break if you can already afford it. But if you can't afford a private, a voucher is never going to cover the costs. And then what has been proven happens, privates just up their prices. And so that inequity continues to grow. And, you know, I hope I've made it pretty clear. I'm a very staunch staunch believer that all students deserve a right to an education, and they deserve the right to the same accommodations and the same resources. And it's I fight for that. My friends fight for that. And that gives me so much hope. But like, part of me is just angry because our kids deserve so much better. And we're doing a disservice to them by supporting these things like the vouchers and school choice. So it's been a tough 10 days.
I would imagine there are so many layers to this. There's most importantly, the kids number one, and the staff, the human part of it. And then my secondary mind goes to content wise, specifically thinking of English, the best subject, Sarah Beth, this is true. Yep. English, history, you know, the topics, the subjects I have a lot of affinity for. Just what content wise, what does that look like in terms of what kids are learning in Marana, in Glendale, where I'm at, across the state? It seems like we're at a really, I don't know if tipping point is the appropriate terminology to use, but gosh, this is, I know this is impacting you. I know this is heavy on your heart. And even here in the Phoenix area, higher education at the university, we're talking about federal grants, and just a lot is in limbo right now. And again, I can't believe it's been less than 2 weeks since you and I were last talking, in which we spoke about Mesa Public Schools and their announcement. Details still pending about definitive staff layoffs coming next year due to declining student enrollment over the past decade at nearly 2,000 students they've lost. The state's largest school district. It's just, I think now is such an important time to check on your friends who are in this. Just check on your friends, period.
Check on your friends.
Who are in
really
education.
Check on your public school teacher friends, because
please. We're going to talk about some public school teachers in a moment. Yeah.
Fighting the good fight. And it is, you know, it's hard because we truly care. We wouldn't be in this job. And I think what's hard too is like, there's a lot of instances where we're being portrayed as having these nefarious intentions. And like, I just want my kids to be able to read and write and do math. And like, it's like sickening to see some of the accusations, like the indoctrination. Like if I was going to indoctrinate a kid, it would be like to write their name on the paper, to push their dang chair in, to cover their mouth when they sneeze. Like, we're not doing these, like, there's no time in the day, like some of these accusations. And then again, like my resources I can barely afford dry erase markers. like my friends, I'm so thankful. My friends donate to my class all the time. I just had I'm a volunteer with the Ronald McDonald House, and they just donated a whole bunch of tissues to
I
my
was just
class.
about to
They
bring
like
up
called
tissue
me and they're like,
boxes.
"Hey, we have this huge donation. We just don't have the room for storage." They're like, "We know you go through them. Do you want some?" And I was like, "Yeah." I show up and it's like the like medical, like what you would order for like a hospital like size boxes of tissues, which will be gone by like the end of the year.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Like, so it's these things of like,
Pencils, we love pencil donations,
yeah,
pre-sharpened, ideally, if at
pre-sharpened,
all
please, or at
possible.
least like
Not to be
red.
choosy, but
Uh-huh. If like I hate to say it, if you're going to donate crayons, please donate Crayola. It does make a difference. It's not that I'm
Sarah
trying to
Beth, what if we were trying to secure a Rose Art
be, no.
sponsorship? The deal
We
is
love Rose Art
the
too.
deal the Rose Art sponsorship has evaporated right
But,
before.
it's these things where like when we're looking at resource and funding cuts and like we're already, and this has been like a long story. Like my dad always told me like growing up, like his dad always told him, you always vote for public education because it never passes. Like, which is, I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that. Dad. Like, I get it. Like you never have to worry about like your taxes raising too much because they can like people don't want to pay into it. And it's like, it's been going on for a long time. And I wish people understood, like, there's a big literacy crisis right now. Like, high schoolers and adults can't read. And like cutting our funding clearly isn't making that better because they've been cutting our funding for years. Let's put the money and the resources back into servicing our kids instead of punishing them for something that's out of their control, just like the Isaac teachers. That what happened there is not the fault of the teachers or the staff or the community. It was the fault of administration, and that's already been handled. And so, like, it's hard right now. Excuse me.
No, absolutely. Thank you, number one, for what you do, Sarah Beth, every day for kids. You are a hero. And number two, for your candor there. Something I loved, and then we'll get to Abbott right after this. Something I loved and will always cherish about my time working in Marana is much like Glendale, it is a very conservative area.
Mhm.
But when I went to school every day, I didn't think about that. I just thought about we were all in this together as a staff, as a community to support kids. And I just hold so many dear memories toward that. And to your point about voting, I just think regardless of your party affiliation or no affiliation, I think we can all agree on the importance of
Mhm.
education and
Yes.
supporting our youth and making sure they're taken care of. And to your point, you use this word, they're equipped with the resources to be literate,
Mhm.
to, dare I say, thrive in K
Yeah.
through 12. And we're just so split right now in terms of what does that look like? How do we get there? What is the best way to
Yeah.
raise and to educate our kids? That I don't want to say there's no turning back, right? I will
Mhm.
continue to wear my optimist cap,
Mhm.
but this just feels like a very, very unique time. I can't think of a time when I was a student here in
Mhm.
Arizona, and certainly when I was a teacher in the classroom every day. And granted, it was not saying it was all perfect and all rainbows and Jolly Ranchers back then. It's been an interesting 10 years in public education in Arizona, but I just hope that this doesn't spell what the next, say, 10 years of education, particularly public education in the state, are going to look like. It just seems like previously there was just, even if we may not vote the same or again have the same party affiliation, we were just on the same team in terms of how do we get to that end goal. And we agree that we need to fund our
Yeah.
schools so that our kiddos can have nice things. And now, again, you brought up when we're using the word indoctrination. It's like, yeah, I was just trying to get to the content objective and make
I was
sure
just trying to
kids
get it
felt loved
annotated.
and safe and seen. But
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
Sarah Beth,
And
I think that leads us right into our conversation about Abbott Elementary. Here we go again. Thank you so much for sharing your POV
of
there.
course, thanks for
Okay,
letting
so we
me.
have 2 episodes to discuss. What's that?
I said thanks for letting me.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I think I'm a certified yapper as well, by the way. I'm not going to take the
So we
nickname
get
from
along.
that nickname is totally yours. I will not take that. If I did, I would need to copyright it. but I like to talk as well. So let's talk about Abbott Elementary. You know how we do 2-pack recap. Episode 11, Strike. Sarah Beth, this garnered nearly 3 million viewers. And here's the plot description. Due to the bus strike, many students cannot make it to school, leading to the teachers of Abbott Elementary switching to hybrid learning. 2 words that you and I know well.
A little bit of
Now,
an eye twitch.
the eye twitch, the visceral reaction. Now, Janine Teagues, eager for the bus strike to end so her students can learn about the solar system, tries to find ways to get her kids back in the classroom. I have done enough talking. I want to pass it to you. What did you think of Strike?
Trying not to start with I loved it or it was amazing because I feel like that's how I always started.
Consistency.
So I grew up in a very pro-union. I actually went to like one of my first union rallies before I was like a year old. My grandfather was a steel worker. Scab was actually my first cuss word. I didn't know it wasn't a cuss word till I was like 10 because the way in which it was used growing up. And so when they're striking and Melissa's my girl and she's like, one, I just loved the efforts that the entire staff went through to make sure the kids still, because it did affect them, right? They couldn't get on the buses. They couldn't get to school. Attendance was down like a lot. I don't remember what it was. And so the ways they were trying to find like the workarounds, but like, so Janine being like, I have a CDL, which is like, why? Of course, Janine has the license to drive a bus. But then Melissa showing up to be like, I'm just here to make sure you don't scab. Like,
hilarious.
she's,
The
like,
party bus was
the
kind of
party
its own
bus.
character on this episode, and the kids are getting picked up. And Janine,
Yeah,
Janine,
great.
Janine's a go-getter. Of course, she has.
She's
a
great.
license.
Like, I loved, and like the adults trying to like sneak onto the bus, which was really funny because it was like, do you even know where it's headed? Like,
yeah, and then wasn't it Gregory and Oshan? This
their little friendship was
low key. My favorite part of this episode may have been the budding friendship between Gregory and Oshan. They went to play basketball together. I bring this up though because I remember I think it was after they hooped. The party bus was like kind of turning around the corner, and Oshan was like, "Oh, what's going on? People are partying this early." And then I think Gregory made a face where he looked into the camera because he knew what the deal was.
Yeah, that. And then with Jacob really trying to help support his student who couldn't really get on because she's helping at home. That was such a soft spot for me because, teaching through remote learning, been there, done that. Hope I never have to go back again. But that was a very similar situation where there were a lot of times with third grade, I'd see the older sibling like sitting in the back helping, or the third grader going and helping the kindergartner. And, and I don't blame, like, we had to do what we had to do. And everyone was like in just such a tight spot. And I loved how they worked around to find a way where it was like, well, I'll meet with you, because they found that when they couldn't both be online at the same time. Because if the older sister was online, the younger sister was off playing, and then she had to leave to go get her back on track. Though it did make me, I'm an oldest daughter. It made me a little bit sad just because it was like, and I get it. And I loved how it was portrayed because she was such a good sport about it. But like, it made me a little sad because sometimes I even have this conversation at school where sometimes like we'll rely on older siblings to like help us with like younger siblings if they're having a tough day or something. And I get it to an extent, but I always kind of speak up where I'm like, hey, like, I don't want you calling the older sibling because they shouldn't be missing out on their education to come take care of a younger sibling. And I get it every now and then, like, it's a really bad day or something traumatic's happened at home, right? There's a difference. But like, when we're constantly calling on an older student, because that's how it is usually in their home too. And so it was like this, she was such a good sport, but it also broke my heart a little bit just because it was like, well, we'll have you get up at 7. And she's very honest. She was like, it's going to suck, like, but I'll do it. And and I love that they found a workaround and they did want to support her. They didn't know how else, what else do we do?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
In this very like strict, this very unfortunate situation.
The pandemic really brought that to light for me. I don't know that I realized the full extent to which many of our students do have those roles at home of being the older sibling and the responsibilities that come with that, or being a significant breadwinner for the household. It was really the pandemic, hybrid learning, remote learning, when I said, oh, wow, like kids really are more than, I mean, the kids who are extra fortunate can just focus on school, right? Or just focus on school and their
Yeah.
extracurricular. But so many of our students from very young ages take on these additional responsibilities at home. And I just did not recognize that, nor have a real appreciation for that element of teaching and for supporting our students. I thought
Yeah,
Abbott really nailed this. So accurate.
yeah, I agree. I had always I had known for a while, but mainly just because of the community I work in. We have a lot of like age gap siblings, so like it's very common to have like a kid in third grade, and then they're talking to you about like their brother that's 21, or like, so I had known for a while, like there were times we've had some kids where like they'd be out and you'd be like, hey, where were you? And they're like, oh, I had to stay home and like watch my brother yesterday, and so it's one of those things where I've heard it, but like when you see it like in that grand scale, and especially like that was the interesting thing about like remote learning, was like you're basically in their home, like seeing those pieces and seeing how much they do, and
So true.
you learn to have like a lot of grace.
And Sarah Beth, on the opposite side of that, with older kiddos at the high school level, I'll never forget one time we were Zooming, and I won't put the student's name out there, but we were Zooming as a class, and I saw his like box on Zoom, and he was in bed, and presumably his partner was with him, and I thought to myself, bruh, I must be envisioning things like, please. This is too much. This is too much. I prefer you being in class. Whenever we can safely make that happen again, let's do it. Because you're right. We saw families, we saw others. I mean, it's such a time capsule. And in my mind, it easily feels like 10 years ago. But gosh, that was just a few years ago. Yeah. And I think this clearly influenced this particular script for Abbott, because obviously it was a strike, not a pandemic for the plot, but some of these tenets felt very familiar.
Well, and I think it shows, right? Like they immediately just jumped into, how do we fix this, right? We can't change what's going on with the strike. So what do we do, right? They didn't give up. They didn't. And I feel like that speaks to teachers, right? Like pandemic happened, and our first thought was, how do we get things to kids? How do we make sure they're fed? How do we make sure they have supplies? And then how do I make this, quarter, like, at least luckily it was like quarter four for like to figure out what to do. But it was, how do I make this engaging? How do I make my kids want to show up? How do I just make sure they're okay? And so like when you like see that, just the way in which, like, again, educators are constantly wanting to support their kids.
Yeah.
It's not just like, I think that's the difference. Like, it's always wild to me when I talk to my friends who do not work in like service type roles, like that work business. It's such a wild where I'm like, oh, you're dealing with like a product and not like a human being. And that's great. They love it. But it's always like a very interesting to have those conversations, because when I'm teaching, like my first thought is like, how am I accommodating for the kid? What does my student need? It's a very different like mindset when I'm talking to, like, again, my friends in like business roles. I tend to hang out with a lot of people that like work in nonprofits or social service work. So that might be why, because I just don't, love my friends who are engineers. I don't get it.
Like, birds of the same feather.
Yeah. Like I've got a couple friends who are engineers and I love them dearly, but I'm like, okay. Like,
it's different. It's a juxtaposition. It's different. That resonates in a big way, Sarah Beth. And before I ask you my specific questions about this episode, to me, what you said also traces back to our conversation earlier about, with all that is happening, particularly in Arizona, the federal context and possible implications. I was going to say simply, not simply, but you show up every day and you give your best and you try to do what's best for kids, regardless of strikes or legislation or whatever the case is. You show up because you love your babies.
Yeah, Exactly.
That's
You show up and you do what's
it's
best
a
for
labor of
kids.
love.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
that's always, like, the conversations we have. We do what's best for kids,
Period.
and typically, like, what's best for kids, what's best for like, those pieces always merge.
Mhm.
But yeah, we
And
do it and we
that
show up,
universe.
because we ain't showing up for the paycheck.
Right.
Like,
That's
yeah.
that universal, whether I was at the RNC
Mhm.
or whether, I voted for Ruben
Yeah.
Gallego. Like, we can all show up and agree to that. Right.
And I
Like,
think
that's
that's
the
the
part
thing.
that
I think that's where
I
we've
hope we don't
lost
lose.
in the last I think that's the hard thing. I think that's the part we've lost is who are we actually showing up for? Like on a grand scale of things, like who is it that we want this to benefit? Like when we really step back and think about, like, are we really thinking about who or are we thinking about what? And I think we've leaned more towards the what over the last few years. And I think we're seeing that now. And so I just hope people can start to step back and see, like, what's best for kids and all kids too.
Okay.
Because that's one of the conversations I'll have. Like a lot of people I talk to who are pro like voucher, that's where they tend. It's like, well, it benefited my kids, which is great. I'm glad it benefited your kids. But what about the rest of kids?
Mhm.
And that's where, like,
Right.
I've always stood, all kids, regardless of economic status, regardless of disability, regardless of home language, like what benefits everyone.
And I have to check myself at times too, because I have people I love and definitely cherish in my life who work at charter schools.
Mhm.
Right. I sometimes friends or
Yeah.
family will say, "Hey, I know this person who's at a charter school. Maybe you should talk to them about teaching again one day."
Mhm.
And then I instantly get petty. I'm like, "No, I'm not gonna. No, I'm not gonna work at it." Like,
Mhm.
it's just very layered. It's very nuanced, and I
Yes.
love anyone who dedicates their life towards serving others. And I just want to make sure the kids are safe and happy and getting a
Yeah.
great education. Okay, Sarah Beth, my 3 questions for you about this episode.
Great.
First, how great is Lila? Shout out to Zinnia Zolamiso for joining us this week. Isn't she the
Fantastic.
best?
I absolutely loved watching her little not little, but little shorter interview because she's younger. There's no way she's not quite at yapping for, an hour straight yet. But I loved watching her on Abbott. I loved watching her interview with you. I loved how highly, and I think this again speaks to the cast, like, they're awesome and but like genuinely, like, she's second grade. And I love that they cast like real kids, like that are in second grade, like her talking about all of the like subjects she loved. And I think she just loves school. Like you could hear it where it was like, I love this and I like this part. And you're like, what about this? I think you asked her maybe science. What about science? And she's like, I love science. And like, I love that energy. Like she loved watching her on the show. But again, she clearly had a great time, which speaks to, again, and no shock, I love Abbott. Like, the thought that they put into,
Do
And
you think
so
when she wins an Emmy, she'll remember us?
I hope so.
I hope so too.
I
Shout out
hope
to
at
her and
least
her
mom and
family.
dad
They're
like write it
fantastic.
down. And like, even if she doesn't remember us, mom and dad like pretend to,
I hope
like when you,
so.
like so many times my
That'd be
parents are
nice.
like, you don't really remember that. You just remember us telling you that. And so like, I'm at
True.
least hoping for that because I think she has such a bright future.
I
She's
couldn't
got the
agree more.
energy and I loved it.
She does. She does. Shout out to Zinnia again. Shout out to her amazing family for setting that up with us here at 4AZ.
Yeah, I
Fantastic.
love.
Okay, final 2 questions. I wrote down best practices for getting easy for me to say, students excited about content, because
Mhm,
that's a real vocal point of this
mhm.
particular episode. Sarah Beth
Yeah.
is Janine, particularly in the context of
Mhm.
science with her kiddos. We mentioned the solar system. What are your, I know this could probably be its own separate episode, but
You're
what are
good.
your
Uh-huh.
best practices for
Oh my
getting
goodness.
students excited about content, and particularly when we're thinking science, math? I know when I was in school, I could think of watching Bill Nye
Mhm.
tapes
Love Bill
on
Nye.
VHS,
My boy
but
is Bill Nye.
started certainly times have evolved.
Yeah.
What are your best practices for getting students excited about this
I love that
content?
you
Much like
asked this
Janine.
because we actually just had our staff meeting on Monday and we talked about engagement strategies, which I could talk about all day. Yeah. I love like any sort of hands-on, especially for math. Math was actually super hard for me as a kid, mainly because like I'm very much, and I didn't realize this until I went into education. I'm very much a like why person. I need to understand why things are the way they are. And math back in the day, I know Common Core gets such a bad rap, and it's really not that bad when you understand it. And Common Core really teaches the why, right? Like when I went to school, like I was just told 3 times 7 is 21 because it is. I didn't understand that I was taking 3 groups of 7 and putting them together, and I didn't see those pieces. So I found like any sort of manipulators, we're working on fractions, and I think every day we used Play-Doh. We've used today it's a lesson we've done forever. It's figuring out like how to find the fraction of greater than 1 whole, and the example is always an orange. But like it was always like modeling it, and that doesn't work. I actually pulled a Janine, and so I cut out a whole bunch of like orange circles for my kids, and then had them like actually fold it so they could see those pieces. So one, very much like Janine, that hands-on like exploration. And then also I found what works for me is just being kind of insane. Like it really gets them like into it. Like some of it, like we had a whole conversation today about, because we're following this phonics program. It's called Foundations, and it's a great program. It's kind of boring. And it's hard, like when you implement a new curriculum, you really have to follow it like by the book the first few years till you understand it. And also as a kid who didn't learn phonics, I'm learning phonics as we go. But we had this whole talk because they're really struggling with like paying attention during that one piece, because it's the one piece I really can't modify. I really can't, like, it has like some hands-on stuff, but it's just, it's not Play-Doh, so it's not fun. And like we had this talk, and like they kind of got like a little silly. They like when we have to identify certain words that have like a schwa. So like the word animal would have a schwa because the I doesn't make an I sound, it makes a. And so you do. And they love saying the word schwa. So anytime they love saying schwa every time.
I'm glad we got that recorded. That was fantastic.
Thank you. I'm gonna die, but it's fine now. But like every time a word has a schwa, I think it's the only concept of the like around like the 6th unit or something. I'm still figuring it out. So foundations, don't be mad at me.
Funny.
No, but like that's the only concept they really have down, because they get to say it every time they have to write it.
It's making
and
it
so
fun.
I found like, just being kind of ridiculous, they love. And then this is one where I'm almost afraid to say it because I don't know that teachers are going to agree with me. I love a content goal. And I know, I see the look. But it's how you use the content goal. So like, yes, if you just like have the content goal up and it's there and you expect them to read it, it doesn't serve a purpose. I use it as a vocabulary lesson. And so we annotate. So I go through and like whatever words like are important to like math, like I can identify fractions. We look at the word identify and fractions. And so like every day they're having to tell me, what is a fraction? Well, it's equal parts of a whole. And so like, I know, because I was that teacher where I was like, content goals were stupid. And objectives never made my kids learn better until like I changed how I used it, right? Like, yes, if I just post it on the board, it serves no purpose. But
it's just there in case my AP drops in.
Exactly, it's there so like I get the check mark on my
hey, assistant principal. Yeah, thanks for.
And like I hesitate to say that because again, I get it, and I know that's kind of the common consensus is that it's stupid. But again, I found by using it and interacting with it, and it helps the kids understand, like, oh, there is a goal. Like I even told my kids today, because Foundations is actually my only block that doesn't have a content goal, because of how Foundations is set up. It's constantly doing different skills.
Oh.
And so we even had that conversation where I was like, guys, I think one of the reasons we're having a hard time paying attention is that we don't really see this as having a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, the
again,
why.
I know I might that might get some comments, and I can take it.
Leave them on YouTube right below if you are
Exactly. Leave them. Let me know what you
watching.
think
If
about
you're
our content
listening
goal.
at 4AZ
Tell
Tube.
me why you
Okay.
think I'm wrong. I'm not, but tell me why you think I'm wrong.
I bet Janine has some amazing content goals and lesson objectives. I'm sure her unit plans are just
Oh, I'm
magnificent.
sure.
Okay, this is
I
not a
am not
question,
a
but
unit
this is my final thought.
planner. Okay.
Just a reflection on how much human capital it takes to make school happen day in and day out, week in and week out. When we think of transportation from school districts, from the city, when we think of cafeteria staff, our amazing
Mhm.
front office clerks, our instructional aides and paraprofessionals,
Mhm.
it's just it really it takes all of us. I know it takes a village, whatever other cliche I can use that is
Yeah.
very apropos. I really love this episode for that. Sarah Beth, episode 12, we must discuss Girard Creek. We've been waiting for this one for quite some time. It's been
We knew it was
looming over
coming.
this season. What is going to go on with this golf course? Okay, here we go. Plot description. The students and faculty are invited to attend a grand opening, a soft launch, if you will, of the Girard Creek Golf Club. After arriving and being swayed by by the staff, the teachers soon uncover that the club is using them for clout, for Instagram clout, as a way of getting back at them,
Mhm.
for being blackmailed. Meanwhile, Barbara helps Gregory adapt to new eating habits, and Jacob continues to find ways to engage RJ, our kind but kind of disinterested student. Okay, my three questions or thoughts for you. I want to start with one and then pass
Mhm.
it to you. Get Out, Jordan Peele, one of my favorite films ever. This episode was giving me Get Out vibes,
Mhm.
and I didn't know I needed a Get Out Abbott kind of mix, but I really enjoyed this episode for that reason because it felt
Mhm.
different. And then I also, Sarah Beth, after hearing your thoughts on the episode, I want to know what was your favorite field trip, either as a student and or as a chaperone.
Okay. I agree. I love just kind of like the apprehense, like where it was like something's not right. Something's not right.
Janine
And
said that.
then yeah, she kept saying it. And I love that she's like, something's not right. And they're like, I think Jacob was kind of like, yeah, but like trying to like justify it. And then watching Ava like stealing the truffles and like all the like side quests. Right. And so like it's like all this ridiculous. Um Barb trying to help him eat something new and he's refusing. And I loved that when it came back to the golf course. I did not like when we were talking, right, back at because this was the one we talked about in episode 1 and 2 when we interviewed. I really thought it was going to be more of like a desegregation or not desegregation. I can't think of the word.
I'm not being helpful at all.
I
This is great
know.
content for our audio listeners.
I know. It's great.
No,
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 it's
we
fine.
were, but you thought,
Desegregation.
correct me if I'm wrong, you thought this was going to be more so, and maybe it still will be at some point, but we thought
No.
more so this is going to
Gentrification.
be
There we go. I got
gentrification.
there.
Okay,
Whew.
with the
Like I thought it was
district,
going to be
with
more of a like gentrification,
yeah,
desegregation.
not
Ooh,
for
that's
IG clout.
bad. No. Yeah, thought it was going to be more of a like gentrification. Everyone's moving into the neighborhood.
Right,
Like it's going to hurt the families.
right,
And so I didn't see it as like, hey, we're going to capitalize on the population of Abbott. We're going to use them to our advantage. And then watching, it was kind of funny though, where she kept saying like, it's not right. And then I like hit a point where I was like, are you not picking up, girl? What's going on? It was as soon as he was interviewing, it wasn't RJ, I don't think, but it was the other older
no,
kid.
yeah,
Because then they go to RJ and they're like, hey, if they ask you any weird questions.
right. But no,
Uh,
the boy that was interviewed, I love
yeah.
this golf course because, like,
Because
just
right then and
again,
there,
get
I
out
clocked it. I was
vibes.
like, oh, they're using them.
They're
And it was funny
using him.
watching
So
Jacob and
funny.
Janine because they're very like similar in personality, right? Like they're always like wanting to like fight for the kids. Like
Yeah, that's why they
everyone on
get
the
along so
show
well.
does, but they're definitely the two that are just still like that young, go get them. I'm going to change education and like at any cost. And so it's funny watching them be like, something's not right, but not put it together. And I feel like that's kind of them where they just like, they don't always like put two and two together where like everyone else in the cast has to like spell it out for them where they're like, yeah, I could have told you that 2 minutes ago.
Usually Melissa.
Yeah, usually Melissa. I think that was like, maybe that was.
We'll talk about her, by the way. Don't you worry. I have a question for you about
good.
Melissa.
And like bring in the 3-legged dog, and like, and then they're like, oh,
adorable.
And then when he's like, why do we have to go to the back for the photo?
Yeah.
And like again, it was just all these.
Was it Charlie? Right? Isn't that his name? Charlie, the only white student at Abbott.
And they're like, can we have someone cover him? But then they put Melissa and Jacob in the back too.
Yeah, that's right.
And I loved when Ava being the one to figure it out, right? And for her, it was just she didn't care until she cared. But then she made this comment where she's like, and I'm not a charity case. Like she was just more mad that she was not even that Abbott was being presented as a charity case, but that she was. And I also loved how we had a resolution for RJ. We found something he's interested in. Fortunately, it is a very expensive sport.
I did not see that coming. That was so obvious. Great writing. It's not podcast club.
Yeah.
It's not stepping. It's golfing at the golf course, the problematic golf course. Of course,
the problematic golf course. Because like when he made the comment, I don't know if you caught where he's like, "We'll come back in a few years. We always need caddies.
We can be a caddy."
My jaw was on the floor.
Excuse me, sir. What? You're just leaning into that villain, your villain era completely.
Yeah. Which I love that he's like a ridiculous villain, right? Like. Yes. Watching Eddie with the truffles where he's like making eye contact.
Gregory Eddie.
I like that we kind of had not maybe closure, but like that it wrapped around back to not only the golf course, but RJ, because I was wondering I was thinking actually after we had talked last time with RJ, where it didn't have a resolution. I was like, are they going to leave it there? Or are they going to come back and find something? Because it is hard, right? Like if you can't find something. Again, never in a million years would golf have happened. Like that was a freak chance, 1 in a million, that I remember wondering after we'd interviewed where I was like, oh, I wonder if they'll ever find something for RJ. And then I kind of figured when last episode they were still talking about RJ. Just like in like side-by where it was like, I think in like the strike episode, it was like, is RJ here? Like very deliberately calling him out. I was like, they have to be bringing him back. And so I'm glad he found something he's interested in.
They know what they're doing. I agree. Yeah. Favorite field trip as a student or chaperone?
Favorite field trip. I think that my favorite was, I have a lot, but I got very lucky living in Florida and Washington for elementary school. We got to go on a lot of cool ones. I think my favorite, though, that I still think about was when we were stationed in Florida. My dad was also military, like Gregory Eddie's family. I had a very different experience than Gregory Eddie. We did not eat for convenience, I think is what he said or something.
It's a very cerebral process. What can you consume quickly and
yeah,
doesn't cause a mess.
I think that leads more to like clearly him and his dad are like I don't know any military families that are like that. And I was like, I think we're more like neurodivergent, Eddie. I don't think that was because we were in the military. But we were stationed close to Cape Canaveral, and so there's a big NASA. I don't know if it's like a NASA Science Center. Again, it's been more years than I want to say out loud since I've been back there. But I always loved I had a big planetarium and different space type. You could go in like a mock model of one of the spaceships. And so I've always really loved space. I think it might be because those were the field trips I went on as a kid. So it was probably my favorite just because they're the ones that definitely I always look back on fondly.
Nice. I love that. We have this place called Exchange City in Arizona, where students, BizTown Exchange City, BizTown, something like that.
I've heard of it. I have not been.
Yeah, I think it's in Arizona, Florida, maybe somewhere else, where students basically simulate the day in the life of an adult. where they have a job, they're working at Best Buy or ASU.
And then they can like
I remember
spend the
when
money they make too,
and
right?
they get a paycheck and they take lunch and it's a whole thing. When I did it, I was a videographer
Nice.
and my buddy Matt was the journalist, like reporting the news around town.
Love that.
Very on brand, actually. Now that I look back on it, but shout out to those field trips. Okay, very specific question for you here, Sarah Beth. I need one answer. Best love story on this episode: Gregory and the bowl of butter pasta, Janine and her Arnold Palmers, or Melissa and Ava becoming a heist duo?
Oh, those are all so good. I think Janine and the Arnold Palmers, because I don't think she knows what an Arnold Palmer is. Because she, at one point, she said, like, it's not soda. She's like, it's 100% there's at the end. She's like, there's lemonade. But she was so funny about it. One, she at points just reminded me of like our kids when they've had too many like juices or something. And like I've watched them where they get that like borderline feral, like when she's like in the boardroom and he's like, how many have you had? And she's like 17. Like,
let me live my best life.
But also
especially on a field trip. On a field
right?
trip, like you really embrace that.
Exactly.
I'm living my best life. This is one of the best days of the semester.
We're very lucky. The Elks Lodge out in Catalina adopts our students for Christmas, and then they do a springtime. And so what they do is they take our students to Walmart and they buy them all new like seasonal clothes. So they get them like at winter, they get them coats and jeans and like everything they need. Very beautiful partnership. And then we go over to the Elks Lodge after, and they do lunch at Christmas. Santa comes on the fire truck. They have gifts for the kids. Easter, the Easter bunny comes. Like, it's this really cool experience, and I go every year. It's a Saturday. I have to get up super early. I end up on a bus with overstimulated children, which is not my favorite part, but it's just such a cool experience because it's for a lot of our kids like the first time they ever even get to go shopping for themselves. In a lot of cases, it's just mom or dad grabbing whatever at Walmart and like bringing it home, or hand-me-downs, things like that. And so it's the first time where they really get to go in. They're partnered with the Elks Lodge comes. And so they're partnered with like a shopper from the Elks Lodge, and they let them go ham. But the Arnold Palmer reminded me of one year they had, they do like lemonade. And so we're at lunch at the Elks Lodge, and the Elks Lodge bathroom was down.
Oh no.
And it's like a 30-40 minute drive back to the school. And one of these kids, because they found like, because again, Elks Lodge, they're wonderful. They don't say no to our kids, and I totally get it. And so I think she was on like 7 or 8 cups of lemonade. Like, homegirl was buzzing. And the whole time I'm like, we have to cut her off because we don't have a bathroom. Like, she's not going to make it. But like every time they came by, she was more. Like, she was like chugging it. And that's what Janine reminded me of. And so I think that's why that, like, it just, watching it reminded me of that year where I was just watching her. Like, they could have hooked her up to an IV. Like, she was
for real.
Yeah.
The last item I wrote for myself is just what's next for Abbott and Girard Creek. I don't know that we're going to get specifically a Girard Creek episode this season, but clearly the storyline is not going away. I wonder if the club is going to do right by Abbott and by RJ and his peers of establishing a golf program, right? Because by the end of the episode, the staff said, "Hey, here's the bargain, because we know what you're doing. This nefarious, these nefarious social media posts,
and we will eat your truffles.
And we will eat your truffles. What you need to do for us is establish this golf program so we can bring kids here like RJ and his peers." So I want to know what's going to happen there. Sarah Beth, before we get to the exit ticket, any final thoughts on this episode?
I just really loved the ending where they're at the restaurant and he's trying so hard because, right, he's learned he like doesn't hate everything, right? He just has never tried anything. And he's like trying to be so positive where he's like, and this in the blood. And she's like, that's not blood, it's wine. Wine is good. And then they both just leave. And he's like, do we have to pay? And she's like, we pay on the way out, I think. was like, you two just
Hilarious.
died in dash. Like,
I love when Barbara told Gregory like how to function at these sort of classy events with fancy mysterious food. Wasn't it? It was
mhm,
napkin. I should have wrote this down. It was like napkin,
napkin, food,
food, thank you, or
smile,
smile.
thank you. Smile,
Th-
thank you. And then watching her do it, and here's something I've learned recently because I didn't know this about the actress who plays Barbara. She talks like that in real life.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
Shirley
which
Ralph,
I had no idea because I'd never, like, seen
Queen.
her interviewed or anything.
Oh yeah,
So one,
she's
like, watching that and, like, I was like, "Oh, I could see her, like, real," and she was so patient with him, but it was funny watching her, right, and it comes so natural, and then watching him, and he's, like, trying to smile, and he's also trying not to throw the food on the floor because it clearly, like, disgusted him. Though, granted, I also get, like, I don't know that I could handle, like, shrimp ceviche in watermelon, sea urchin, like, I also would have been a
that's
little
a little extra.
apprehensive.
Yeah,
Um, but I loved just the patience she showed because she, clearly loves Eddie and wants him to be successful. But also, she loves Janine. She's like, you can't just like Janine wants these experiences. Like, you have to
yeah,
try. And they
yeah.
always talk like the growth that we've
Yes,
seen has been great.
yes.
And like, but I love that they just constantly like instill that. Like,
I
they
agree, and
are
that's
doing
the
things they don't like or that they're scared of because they trust the other person.
I agree. That's the real beauty of Abbott to me is an episode like this one, Girard Creek, where they can kind of break off the episode into the cast being in pairs.
Mhm,
You pointed out Janine and Jacob, spitting images of each other in many ways.
mhm. Yeah.
Barbara and Gregory, as you pointed out. I'm surprised you didn't choose this duo, this love story. Melissa and Ava, who now I need an episode of just them in
Yes.
full heist
Could you
mode as
I
they
love
as
that.
they
Could
try
you
as they try to
imagine
take the
those
remaining
2
truffles back to
like,
school.
I know, and I love I love that part, but like, man, Janine with the Elmer Palmer and again, teaching 3rd graders, she was very much like a child in that, and I think that's where but could you imagine if we just had some sort of, like, not spin-off, but spin-off with Ava and Melissa, like, the
I need it.
shenanigans those 2 would get to, because you've got Ava, who's very bougie and, both girls, stand up for themselves, their confidence is unmatched, like, they're very, like, parallel, but also very different, and, like, I would love more of just, like, their friendship because I think granted that we may end up with them in jail or something, like,
It's a
those 2
possibility.
are I think Melissa would get them in jail, and then Ava would, like, get them
Yeah.
talked out of it.
Yeah,
Like
100%. I was just about to say that.
yeah, like
100%.
but
I need it.
I loved seeing their little not little, but friendship
Me
kinda
too. They're
there.
trying to get the truffles back to campus.
Mhm.
Okay, Sarah Beth, exit ticket before we get out of here. The question is very straightforward. Who was the MVP of this Abbott 2-pack?
Oh, man. The MVP,
I didn't
this is
send you this question
straightforward.
ahead of time.
I
This
know
is what we
you
call
didn't.
this
I'm,
is
like,
what
on
we
the spot.
call this is what we call organic content, Sarah Beth.
I know. You
You
never
can
send me
only
any
choose
writ
one.
only one. I am going to go with Eddie because he really got out of his comfort zone. He tried truffles. He tried so many new things for him. And like I love seeing growth and I love seeing people like try those pieces. And also I just loved when he came into the room at when they were with the lawyer, right? And she's like, I'm gonna get my boyfriend, he's gonna beat you up. And then he comes in, and then it's like the eye contact he was making while like threatening to eat the truffle. And like it was just solid.
It was fantastic. Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
there are so many great candidates. I'm leaning toward Jacob,
Yeah.
just because that relationship with RJ and the fact that, as you pointed out, Sarah Beth, we got that resolution of
Hmm.
finding out what RJ enjoys.
Yes.
Jacob, relentless in terms of his passion
Mhm.
for kids and supporting the Abbott community. I'm going to go with him for this one. Sarah Beth, this has been a blast, as always. I think this was your 3rd
It is my third.
appearance
I'm doing
on
something right
the
that you keep
show.
letting me come back. So,
Dang,
and I don't
dang.
take it
Look,
for granted.
of course. the certified yapper herself. Love having you here for these Abbott recaps. Please be sure to follow Sarah Beth. She is at Dear Sarah Beth. Follow us at 4AZ Teach. And thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you, Sarah Beth, for being here.
Thank you for
We'll
having
see you all
me.
next time.